Hey folks, before we get this episode started, I'd like to take a moment to thank our Patreon supporters over on patreon.com/positivelytrek, including Carl Morris, Joyce Marin, Jim Stoffel, and Dave Garcia. Thank you all so much for your support. If you'd like to help keep Positively Trek coming to you each week, please go to patreon.com/positivelytrek. You can help out the show, and at any level you will receive perks such as early access and exclusive bonus content. Thank you all so much for listening. And with that, let's get on with the show.
All right, it's time for a celebration, Dan. You and me talking about TOS. I mean, it's time that we really celebrate the series that started it all, Star Trek, the original series.
For sure. 55 years ago, it's perfect time. It's a nice, multiple of 5. Everybody seems to like those. So, yeah, it's a great time to talk about it. So, do we have anything we can kind of refer to if we're celebrating TOS or anything like that? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe there's a book. That would make a lot of sense. Like Star Trek, the original series, a celebration. Because you remember they did a book on Voyager like that?
Oh, yeah. The kind of convention in a book idea. I remember that. Yeah.
I love that. They really should do that for the original series. We should get like Ian Spelling and Ben Robinson to put that together. Like, can you imagine if we had them on the podcast now? We could ask them to do that.
That would be amazing. I don't know how we can pull that together kind of last minute here, but I think that's a great idea.
Okay. Well, let me just go here into the transporter and beam them in. And hey guys, how you doing?
Doing okay. How are you?
Doing well.
Good. Not too bad. Welcome to Positively Trek. So glad to have the both of you on.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate it.
Now, this idea for a book, doesn't that sound great? You guys should really do that.
Talk to Ben.
Oh, yeah. You remember
Talk
that?
to Ben.
I thought we had that idea. I remember spending a lot of time doing something very like that.
Oh, wait a second. I have it right here. You've already done it. And I've read most of it. Not all of it, because I'm still working through
that's
it.
good. I'm glad someone has. It's only been out for a few days. So, we are as curious as you are, probably, actually. I want to know what you liked, what you made of it.
Okay, well, I will let you know for sure. But it does remind me in the format of the Voyager book, which we talked about earlier this year, which is really great. So tell us about how this one came about. Because after you did Voyager, was that the thing that made you say, hey, let's do a TOS book?
No, to be fair, I think I always thought of this as a series of books that would cover all the different series. And if I get my way, not just Star Trek, but all sorts of series. And because it was the Voyager anniversary last year, it made sense to start with Voyager. But, my grand plan is to work our way through everything. So, and obviously it's the TOS anniversary this year, and then Next Gen next year, and then Deep Space Nine the year after that. Oh, it's a strange kind of run of anniversaries. It might give you a hint to the way we're thinking.
Amazing how that works. Yeah.
Okay, so I will say that I was thinking of something as I was reading this book that I'd like to see you do this same format for other things. And maybe you're already thinking of this. And if you haven't, and you like this idea, please, you have it recorded here of me saying, take it, run with it. You don't owe me anything. But I would like to see books like this that focus on each like species or something. Like there's the Romulan book, the Klingon book that goes through the history of every series and how those develop, because you touch on the different aliens in TOS and how they were introduced.
Yeah, I mean, I love that kind of thing. I love that thing of seeing how things change and grow. And, the thing you learn when you talk to all these people about making TV shows is it did not spring fully formed from someone's head. It was not like, oh yeah, Gene Roddenberry sat down in 1964 and thought, right, I know what all 79 episodes are. It just doesn't work that way at all. And I hope that that's what you get from the book, is a sense of how things evolve and change. And, they only came up with the Klingons because the years were too expensive for the Romulans. It's life is full of accident.
So one thing with regards to this book, and this is kind of mentioned at the beginning with the introduction, is there are tons of books about the original series, like Making of Star Trek and the Concordance and all this stuff. And you talk about wanting to set this apart and make it different from everything that's come before that, and how that was kind of a guiding principle when writing this book. So how did you make this a special kind of different creature from those other books? And how did you kind of realize that goal?
So Ian, you remember this was like our first conversation.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Exactly. Look, one of the big challenges with this kind of book is Star Trek is 55. What is fresh and new to tell? There are stories about this, that, and the other thing that have been told, but this was one book, that was another book, and the other thing was yet another book. This kind of is an umbrella that puts it all in one place. And that was one of the things I think that Ben and I are most pleased with about the book. Yes, there may be books about the makeup of the show, and that's a book unto itself. We have 256 pages in this book to tell the story of the original series. So we can't devote 256 pages to any one thing. So we tried to really cover all of it and get to the key points in each of the elements that we wanted to cover. And I think that was the big thing that we were shooting for. Ben, you agree?
Yeah, I think that pitch, that initial idea I had of like, it's the best convention you could ever go to in a book. Mm-hmm. That no one's ever really done that for the original series. I mean, Ian and I have read everything that anybody has ever written about the original series, I promise you. And quite recently, in fact. And what we wanted to do was to bring it all together in one place. Right. So, and we wanted to strip away some of the myths as well. I mean, I wanted you to feel like you had a really good idea of what it was like making the series. So we wanted to cover everything. So, the fact that Bill Tice has got people like making the costumes down the road so that they're not union people and they're hanging them, passing them through the windows in the morning so they don't get caught. Leonard Nimoy's getting in to see Fred Phillips and getting in the makeup chair at 6:30 or 6:30 in the morning, and Phillips is like rolling his own cigarettes as he does his ears. I wanted to just give that kind of sense of it coming together and being alive. Because I think there's so much has been written, but it's in so many different places, and you don't really get to kind of pull it all together and get an overview.
That's how I felt when I was reading it, because to your point, I've read other books about the making of TOS or stories that have taken place during it. And I was still picking up things in here that I either never heard of before or forgotten, but just little things that just showed the evolution of how the show was getting made. Even just the little nuance of trying to get Gene Roddenberry to write the opening and the time crunch and getting that done so William Shatner can record it. I mean, those little elements were quite interesting. Was there anything that you picked up on that you never knew before that you added to the book?
Well, there were things we never knew because no one knew, as far as I know. So we found a few people to interview who no one had ever talked to. I mean, it's been 55 years and most of these people were in their 30s. So, sadly, most people who worked on the original series are long gone, or relatively recently gone in the case of Dorothy Fontana. But we did find some people, some post-production guys. There's one guy who, there are the two great stories. I love these stories that we've never heard before. There's one guy who looks out the window and sees Elvis walking into the Desley reception and ends up going and introducing him to the cast, which sorry, not Elvis. I said Elvis. I meant Muhammad Ali. Why did I say Elvis? There's an Elvis story as well. There's a Jimmy Doohan Elvis story. Right. But Muhammad Ali, the Ali story is fantastic. And, there's Ali wanting to meet Nichelle Nichols and being nervous and being worried that she won't want to meet him. And then there's another guy who, on the very last day, he was working in the post-production team. And the last day, he sees them putting all this stuff in the dumpster, and he walks off with the 6-foot model of the Enterprise, one of the Gorn costumes, a box of tribbles, and what he called the eye charts from sickbay. So these were stories I don't think we'd never heard them, and I kind of figure if Ian and I had never heard a story, not many people can have heard it.
Right.
And then Ian, you talked to a few people who people really haven't talked to that much.
Right. I was thrilled. I got a little obsessed about things. Ben and I had the conversation. Look, let's find the stories that either haven't been told at all or rarely been told, and tell them in their full scope. And so I was thrilled to track down Reuben Klemer, who was the guy who created the gun toy for Man from U.N.C.L.E. And it turns out that he had created the phaser rifle for Where No Man Has Gone Before. Well, that second pilot helped convince NBC that Star Trek could be an action show as much as a highfalutin sci-fi type of show, right? And a high concept. And so they bought the show based on that. And that phaser rifle was used in a publicity shoot and then basically never seen again on the show or anywhere in the world. Well, Reuben Klemer had it for like 50 years. He finally sold it at auction for $250,000. And do you remember the Game of Life, the board game, the Game of Life?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
He's in the Hall of Fame for creating that game. The board game Hall of Fame for creating the Game of Life. And so he was 99 years old when he passed away last week. And he's in the book. I was able to track him down. It literally took me about 2 weeks of asking around and emailing, and I finally found him, and he was sick. And all of a sudden, his assistant calls one day and says, "Mr. Klemer's having a good day. Can you talk?" And I said, "Let's do it right now." And I literally just on the spot winged it for 20 minutes and chatted with the man. So I'm thrilled he's in the book. And then another great example was April Tatro, who was the human form of the cat Isis from Assignment Earth. It's a long story. The short version is nobody knew who played that. It was an uncredited role. And then another actress was thought to have played the role. And she finally came out a few years ago and said, "It wasn't me, leave me alone. I don't want to sign photos of a role I didn't do." Well, Larry Nemechek had found her and he had her on the podcast, but she'd never done an interview for print. So the first interview ever with her that's on a piece of paper is in our book. So I was thrilled to get her. And there's lots of things like that in there as well.
Yeah, because we're big Star Trek fans, we all know anything anybody had any association with Star Trek, we're interested in and we want to talk to, we want to hear more from. It's always interesting me that you find people who are actors or people who are behind the scenes that just did a small thing and never thought anybody would be interested in anything they have to say. Like Carrie Foster was another example. What was she, an actress on The Cage? Is the only living one. Never thought anybody would be all that interested in her.
Right. And she was a fascinating woman, and there was a Roddenberry family connection and all sorts of interesting stuff with her that we had never heard, and still alive and had that story to tell, and it's in the book. And she's got her own chapter. We were thrilled to have her too. And there's a bunch of those in the book. Andrea Dram was also a really interesting story. And there's a bunch of others in there. And as Ben was starting to say, we pulled out some boxes in the book where you'll see little anecdotes that have interesting stories that may or may not be familiar to a lot of people out there. And I just want to touch on that. That was one of the key things that we were shooting for. It was kind of the line we needed to walk. The book is meant to have some fresh material for people who are hardcore fans. We have photos in there that either have never been seen before or rarely ever been seen. And we're particularly proud of that, I can tell you. And then we also wanted to make sure that the book was accessible to people who are newcomers to Star Trek and kind of introduce them to the world. If you've got like a 17-year-old kid who's discovering Star Trek through Discovery, they will get a lot out of this book because it will take them to the source of where it all began. And that was the other goal. And I think, Ben, tell me if I'm wrong, you're the boss. I think we walked that line pretty well of creating something that will appeal to both audiences.
I'm certainly very pleased with what we ended up with, but it's up to the readers to tell us, I guess. I mean, to go back to Ian's point, the other thing that I really wanted to do is kind of forget everything we know now. You know, that you sit there now and we all know Star Trek and we think of it as Kirk, Spock, McCoy. We think about the importance of Scotty or Sulu or Uhura, all of that. But when they were making the series, I really wanted to do so, like the Andrea Drom, who was the yeoman in the second pilot, or Laurel Goodwin, who was the yeoman in the first pilot. We wanted to sort of take you through and say, this is who it was going to be. It was really close to being this, and to give some time to those characters. It's like the yeoman was intended to be a really major character in the original series in the first season. It's only when they kind of halfway through the first season that they kind of think, actually, that's not really working. Let's change course. So we wanted to just sort of sweep away everything and just start again, as it were. Just sort of like come into this imagining you hadn't seen Star Trek,
right?
And seeing how it changes and how it comes into being.
And Andrea stepped away on her own accord to do a movie. Russians are coming. The Russians are coming. I mean, interesting, fascinating anecdote. And then Laurel Goodwin talks about how her life would have been completely different if the show had continued with her on it. Everybody's story is different. It's really interesting to us as fans of the show to find these little nuggets that fascinate me, no pun intended.
Yeah, it is incredible, like going through this and like you, I've probably read just about everything that I could get my hands on. And yeah, to see stories or little tidbits that I've personally never heard before, that's just such a gift to lifelong Star Trek fans. And to your point about the photographs, I remember like opening this up and going like, oh yeah, there's going to be the familiar photos that are in every book. And then I just randomly, there was a page with DeForest Kelley as McCoy, and it's definitely a photo I've never, ever seen before. And that's just such a nice little gift to the fans who consume all of this so voraciously to have the new things like that. I love that.
Can I point something out that was thrilling for me as a fan and as the co-writer of this book? I brought it with me to the Vegas event last month, and I showed George Takei and I showed Brad, George's husband, the book, and George was autographing it for me. And they're sitting there looking at the photo saying, Ian, we've never seen this photo or this photo of George. They're like, where the heck did you get these? And can we get copies? Because I think they wanted to have him to have him sign at shows. But it was great. That's the kind of reaction we wanted. This is a guy who's been with the show for 55 years, looking me in the eye and saying, I've never seen this before.
I think that's the other
so cool.
The other thing about, Ian and I both been doing this a long time. And we were very finely attuned to what people hadn't seen. So we knew when we came across them, we're going, no, you don't see that one. We were looking at stuff and go, well, actually, yeah, people have seen that photo. I've seen that one before. It's kind of rare, but I have seen it. Well, I've never seen that one. Let's go with that. I mean, there are some pictures in there from the cage and from Where No Man Has Gone Before that absolutely blew my mind. I had never seen them. And in fact, there are more that aren't in the book, but they're, just some spectacular photographs from the first two pilots.
And guys, if we can give a shout out here to James Cawley, a lot of the photos came from James Cawley. He's the guy who runs the Star Trek set visit up in Ticonderoga. He has a personal collection that he has amassed. And we're in the midst of the pandemic, and you have myself and Ben and James, and it was James's son, Patrick, right?
Yeah.
That was with us. So the four of us are on a Zoom call, just like the four of us now, looking through photos on our computers and sharing and go, oh my God. Literally, we were like, can I say shit? We were like pigs and shit, looking at these photos, going, oh my God, I've never seen this before. How cool. We were totally geeking out at these photos. It was absolutely amazing. And a lot of them are in the book. There are 200 photos in the book, and a very good chunk of them are either very rarely ever seen a handful of cases, Ben?
I have a story I haven't told you, Ian, actually. Oh. So the other person who was a great help to us is a guy called Gerald Gurian,
right,
who runs the Star Trek Pop Authority. And Gerald is incredibly helpful. He provided us with a lot of the film trims So, they used to keep all the little extra overs from the editing bay. They'd get swept up at the end of the day and sent down to Gene and Major's house, and they'd sell them at conventions. And he was like, well, I've got these, I've got a lot of Matt Jeffries stuff if you want it. And I was like, well, actually what happened was Matt gave me this folder. It's like an NBC folder with all of the things that he still had transparencies on. And I had never really, I'd kind of gone, okay, yeah. There's like 360 pictures in there. Plus there's a load of other stuff, which we didn't even touch in. There's a load of very red-shifted stuff, which are like the film trims he took, which he used to show to visiting directors and stuff that would show the sets from all the different angles. But Gerald was like, oh yeah, I've got, and then it turned out what had happened is that Gerald had been given a copy of my folder by Penny Juday, who used to work for us at the time. But I hadn't also realized until we did the book, I was sort of going through and realizing how many of those 300 and something pictures had been used or not. Because a lot of them were in the Herb Solo original series sketchbook, but not all of them by any means. There's certainly not 360 pictures in there. And we were able to do things like we'd put stuff together that I'd never seen put together. So Gerald had film trims of Stratos from the Cloudminders, which was like this polyfoam model thing that they hung from the ceiling originally. And I had the concept art for it. And no, I don't think I'd ever seen them on the same page before, along with the finished shot. So that was the kind of bringing everything together that was a real pleasure for me.
Mm-hmm.
This is just amazing to me because, so cool. As I was going through the book, I was noticing photos I'd never seen before. And again, I'm thinking, I've seen it all. I even have the book Star Trek Lost Scenes. And I thought, oh, I've seen them all. The ones I haven't seen were in there, and now I've seen them all. Where do these people find these? Like, where does James get these photos that he has them that no one else has seen? I mean, it's just, I guess, going to different shows and reaching out to different people.
Yeah, I mean, the story is a long, complicated one because Gene took all of the publicity photographs and that stuff with him when he left. So none of this is, very little of it is actually in the Paramount CBS archives. So it's all been kind of spread to the world, and they, been sold at conventions like the film trims. The original publicity stills haven't been seen 1,000 times because the ultimate rights holder doesn't have them anymore. And you get this, you find that back in the day, people used to give people the originals and then not bother to get them back. So there's actually even more out there than you might think. And we're really pleased to have put as much of it as we can in this book.
There's so many little stories in here that I would love to talk through all of them, but of course we don't have time, and I don't want to spoil too much in the book. I want people to read the book and go, I didn't know that, or that's interesting. But Nichelle's costume as Uhura was originally greenish gold, and then they switched it to red, and I never really knew the reason for that, but it seems like it was just to be,
looks better. See to there. It's better for her coloring. Yeah.
Yeah. And they were saying and adding color to the series. And so you put an African-American woman on. Well, you said you wanted more color on the show, little bits like that were very interesting.
The one I'd forgotten, there are a couple I'd forgotten, which I did know. But again, you have so much Star Trek in your head that you can't access all of it in one go. So the two stories I'd forgotten were one, that it was Grace Lee Whitney who made them shift from pants to miniskirts, because she came on and said, "You're not making use of my best asset. Why am I wearing trousers?" So they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, we'll put you in a mini dress." And then as a result, everybody else ended up, every other woman ended up in a mini dress. And then the other one I'd forgotten about, which I remember laughing at the time you told me about it, was when they were filming Arena. Matt Jeffries told me that they found this guy who made these lightweight rocks. So they got a couple of these lightweight rocks for him, and they went up there and they're filming with them. And they turn around and they kind of hear this noise, and they discover that dogs have eaten one of the rocks. And it turns out that the guy had filled the rocks with dog food. And it was like... And Matt was like, and the guy was like saying he wanted us to pay for the rock. And I was like, no way. You didn't tell us it was full of dog food.
Why would they put dog food in a rock?
That was Matt's point. Matt was like, why would he fill it with dog food?
Oh, that's brilliant. So I love the layout of this book. So it's, there's so many books that are like, they try to be episode guides and they, have little interstitials in between them or something like that. Your book here, it's got focuses on particular episodes, but not every single episode, not, in that kind of way. And interspersed through this, you have spotlights on the various actors and like the makeup department, which that was one of my favorite sections of the book here, looking through this. What was the kind of thinking in how this was laid out and how you decided to present this information in this way?
Well, it goes back to the Voyager book. I guess I've always wanted to read about every TV show I've ever watched or loved anyway. But I've never really found a book that did it the way I would want it to. So one of the great privileges of, getting to choose what goes in a book is you just like, well, I'll do it the way I want to do it. I'll do it the way I would be interested in. And for me, that was, you want to know about the characters. If you think about that convention thing, you go to a convention and you want Bill Shatner and Leonard Nimoy and, Dee Kelly and George Takei and Walter Koenig, everybody to be there and to tell you how their character came to be and why they were the way they were, and to tell you some funny stories. But I've always thought that the thing that people forget about is that the actors are at the end of the process and often don't know the answers to the questions people would ask them. Why was it like this? And mostly the actors don't really know. Leonard Nimoy is a bit of an exception. Leonard was very, very influential on why Spock was the way he was. So I wanted that to include the writers so that it wasn't just one person talking about the character, but lots of people who were involved in the creation of that character. And then you get kind of funny, nice little kind of asides and tidbits. Like one of my favorite things is George Clayton Johnson, when he wrote The Man Trap, wanted to make, because there were no relationships were really established at that point, he wanted to make Kirk and Scotty best friends, which is ironic. But that would have, in his mind, that would have been the kind of the main relationship in the show, the captain and the engineer, not the captain and the science officer. Anyway, sorry, off on a tangent. And then I think the other thing was like the work of all the departments. And then you like look at it and you think, well, actually, but people want to know about Klingons and Romulans and phasers and tricorders and all those kind of things. So you put all of that in, and then it's a little bit different. I mean, Ian, I think we talked about how this had to be different to the Voyager book,
right?
Because the Voyager book had been very much, and I think Mark and I did something like 35 new interviews for the Voyager book,
right?
And that wasn't an option. We would have been very happy to do it, but Ian had this incredible archive of interviews he's done with the guest cast, and to be able to sort of just pull that together was a big goal for us. It was something that would make this book stand out, I hope.
Right. And to your point, guys, about the episodes, we also didn't, if you notice, we didn't call them the 12 best episodes of Star Trek. For Ben and I literally sat there and debated and conversed and argued a little bit about what were the most important episodes, which were the ones that, even if they weren't as important, were the ones that had an influence either on the show or the fans for whatever reason. So it's not a top X amount list. It's episodes that were important for whatever reason. They introduced the Romulans. They established this relationship. They did whatever function that they served in the show, that at the time it was just another episode. They didn't realize what they were creating in the process. All of that came later. And so it was fun for us to go back and say, all right, let's see how this episode helped connect the dots to even what you're seeing on Lower Decks now. So interesting to us in that way. And that's why the episodes in there, if we get feedback where somebody's like, well, how come you didn't do this episode? This is the best episode. Well, we didn't because it wasn't the best of episode type of listing in the book. And we really enjoyed that, trying to argue which ones were the ones worth covering. And if you looked at our list, we literally, the 2 or 3 that didn't make it, I'm sure we're both kicking ourselves saying, well, should we have added more pages? But we couldn't.
Yeah, I mean, you end up
draw a line somewhere, right?
Original series, you end up doing like 40 best episodes,
right?
The 78 best episodes of the 70, yeah.
Oh no, I've got a couple I really don't like. I've got at least
77,
3 I really don't like.
Yeah, if there's, any book that has a big feature on where the children shall lead, no.
Yeah. Well, there's one of the rarest things in there is the Gorgon sketch, which was reproduced from a kind of official fanzine from 1968, and I had never seen that before.
Yeah, I was flipping through and saw that one as well, and I was like, oh wow, that's interesting for sure. Absolutely. Just looking through here, and for example, the new and interesting stories that you guys found, for example, April Tatro, I just love that story with the whole Larry Nemeczek angle and all of that as well. And the fact that it's opened up whole new worlds for her, the fact that she can be a first-time signer now for a trading card set that's coming out next month, as an original series character, just as a little tie in there. I think that's really cool. And I love that story is highlighted in this. So that's awesome.
And she was lovely as could be. And I met her at one of her first conventions in Europe a couple of years ago. And it's actually where I conducted the interview. And this was a whole new world to her. Mm-hmm. She had no clue. And she had a long line because nobody had ever seen her before. And so she was doubly astonished. She's like, 1, why does anybody care about me? And 2, why is my line so long? And I said to her, you understand that you are a person of fresh interest to these people who in many cases are completists and want everybody and everything associated with Star Trek, and you're still alive and you are full of stories and you're full of energy. Of course they're going to be interested in you. And she was absolutely dazzled. She was amazed. And, I called her and said, like, you're going to be in the book and it's going to be great. And here's it's coming out. And I sent it to her and, she wants to send a note. I literally just got a note from her convention agent saying she wants my address and Ben so she can just send us thank you notes for including her in the book. What a great story.
That's awesome. Yeah. Very cool.
You have to wonder what she's thinking all these years when she's hearing about the popularity of Star Trek and the conventions that are going on. And she's just like, yeah, but nobody would be interested in me.
Right.
I don't mean anything to anybody. How little she didn't know how much it means to these fans. You know?
And she made about $90-something for her appearance. Yeah. I mean, think about that. She's going to sign 3 autographs and make more than that.
Yeah. Oh, it's crazy.
Oh, she's finally getting paid the big bucks.
Oh, yeah.
After all these years.
Right. Yeah. She's going to get 6 houses like Ben.
Well, I also like, speaking of like big bucks and things, it's like I love how George Takei finds out that James Doohan is making money from selling scripts that he had, and here George's niece and nephew have been coloring on his.
Isn't that a great story?
It's just trash.
Yeah, you get the same thing with the Tribbles. Everyone's like, "Oh yeah, I just gave the Tribbles to the kids." It's like, oh. Or like the guy who works in post production who took the box of Tribbles home. They were in his garage and they got rained on, so he threw them away.
Crazy. And it's funny. Terry Farrell gave me 2 Tribbles from the Tribbles episode that they did. I said to her, nobody's going to believe these are from the show. So she actually wrote on an autograph photo for me, I gave Ian 2 Tribbles in 1990, whatever. They're real. Somewhere I have that photo and the Tribbles are in a box somewhere in my house. It's great.
Well, and the best thing is now you start with 2 Tribbles. Who knows how many you have now when you open that box.
Very careful not to feed them.
That's right. Them or the gremlins. Absolutely. Don't feed them.
The other thing, though, I wanted to mention about this book that I liked as I was reading through it is it's current, right? I mean, because there's things in there that makes reference to the new series, Strange New Worlds, coming out when you're talking about the Cage or those characters from it. And as you mentioned earlier, Ian, about Lower Decks. And there was even a little short segment there about Simon Pegg playing Scotty and how he approached the character and not trying to imitate James Doohan as Scotty. So again, even if someone says, oh, I know everything about Star Trek, this is an updated version. This is from a perspective from 2021.
Right.
Yeah. And I think the other thing, to go back to the layout, it's not just the content of the book, but it looks, I mean, that's the thing I'm most excited by, is the way it makes Star Trek look fresh and contemporary and new. You know, we took the layout we designed for Voyager, put the original series, and I went, wow, this looks great. You know, I mean, just to give it that kind of modern treatment, and you realize how much of that stuff has come back around again. You see it on Strange New Worlds, like with those strong colors, very kind of 60s modernist aesthetic. Really, really made it look fresh and new, and I hope that makes people think about it in a different way as well.
It's contemporary. As old as it is, it's contemporary.
Timeless, even.
There you go.
Yeah, definitely. Just looking at some of the behind the scenes photographs and stuff, the filming of the miniature of the Enterprise, and the one thing that I hadn't seen before was the original transporter effect from the cage, that like the particles coming in from the sky and the weird outline, and we didn't just decided not to go with that. All these little decisions that echo through the last 55 years now, 55 plus years, because of course the cage was even earlier than that. But like the opening narration, like the narration we could have gotten versus what we have now, and all that stuff. It's so wonderful to see that evolution and see that take shape on the page here. It's really amazing job you guys have done.
Yeah, I mean, on the beaming, there's also, they were originally going to show a beam going from the ship to the planet, and they just thought, it's another optical, it's another expense, let's not do it. And then the beaming itself, I mean, people do know this, but the beaming's there because it was cheaper than landing shuttles. You had to have like a great big winch with a shuttle. So yeah, I mean, there's loads of stuff there that either we kind of half knew, but you'd never put it all together. I mean, the example I always give people is like Leonard Nimoy. All the stories that Leonard had told, and he was, Leonard, I mean, both Ian and I had the privilege of interviewing him, and Leonard was remarkably sharp and clear in his memories. I mean, I interviewed George Takei. He said, Ben, I don't actually remember being in Star Trek. Leonard would be like, it was a Tuesday, though it had been raining, which is unusual in Los Angeles. I mean, he was like, but to actually take all of those stories and put them in sequence, which was something I'd never seen done before. So you'd see that Spock goes from, okay, you're getting number one's characteristics, so now you're cold and dispassionate. To have him sort of go, okay, and the act has changed, so now I'm acting against Bill Shatner instead of against I want to say Anson Mount, and I don't. Jeff Hunter. And because Jeff Hunter had been a very subdued actor and Shatner was not subdued, it changes his performance. And then you get okay, now play it cold, now do this, now have the nerve pinch, now have the mind meld, now have this, all of those things, and seeing how they were introduced in the course of that first season, and knowing that Amok Time was originally going to be in the first season. That story, I don't think I'd ever seen it put together that way before. And that again, I think that's just one example of that. But that's what we wanted to do, is to kind of put stuff together to give you a narrative.
And part of the narrative that fascinated me with Jeffrey Hunter was, the whole thing about him leaving the show. Was it his wife who said no? What was Hunter's thought? What did Hunter think of Star Trek? Well, I tracked down his son, who gave us some context for how much he was actually interested in the show. And I get this whole story of them sitting in a car together and his dad telling him about, here's what's interesting to me about Star Trek. I had never heard the story before. It was amazing to me.
Wow.
And, again, it's a little piece of history, but there's now context to it. Oh, he was interested in the role. He did think Star Trek was interesting. Other circumstances led him to leave, but how cool is it that he liked what he was doing and the idea behind it? And I hadn't really seen that before anywhere. So I was thrilled that we were able to include that in the book.
That's cool. I had seen a few years ago Jeffrey Hunter's son pop up on an internet forum talking about Anson Mount's performance, and he said how his father would have appreciated the performance and stuff. But like, I feel like that's the difference between us fans who are like, oh, that's kind of cool, and then you guys who are putting this together who are like, let's talk to that guy and get his stories. And I wouldn't have thought of doing that. And that's such a brilliant, that's an amazing interview to get and stuff. That's pretty cool. I love that.
And that is the great privilege of what we do, is that you get to say, well, shall we try and get so-and-so? Has anyone ever talked to so-and-so? Let's ask. And pretty much everybody says yes. Not everybody, but most people do. And the other thing, I guess, is like, Ian and I both were lucky enough to have interviewed these major figures who aren't with us now. Sadly, neither of us ever got to talk to Gene Coon, but between us, we talked to. I don't think we gave up counting when we started. Well, I interviewed. Oh, yeah. I was like, oh yeah, I had a long chat with Margaret Arman. I had a chat with, the list of people that we were lucky enough to talk to, having started doing this 25, 30 years ago, is extraordinary. Between the two of us, we really, really have an incredible list.
Right. I met Roddenberry when I was in college and got to interview him. It was crazy. That's
amazing. I wouldn't mind just touching a little bit on that. Like, Ian, your very storied career of talking to a lot of these famous people and people very important to our fandom. I did just a little bit of kind of a look into your career and your time with the various magazines. And even before that, just the interviews you were able to get. I guess what to you would maybe be the most memorable opportunity you've gotten to talk to somebody involved in Star Trek?
Well, the Roddenberry story was fascinating to me just because I was in college. I met him at a convention and I wanted to interview him. He was with Majel. So Majel sat with me and did a 10, 15-minute interview. And Roddenberry said to me, I would love to talk to you, young man, but I don't have time. Hands me his business card and says, call my assistant, tell her I said yes. Fine. So I get back to SUNY Albany and I want to interview him for my college newspaper. I called this woman and she says, yep, Mr. Roddenberry told me, no problem. And the next thing I know, we have a day and a time. And I go back to my suite and there's a yellow sticky on the door that says, Gene Roddenberry called. He has to postpone the interview. A famous director died and he has to go to the funeral. Here's his home office number. Call him tomorrow and you'll reschedule. And I said, okay. And you have to understand, Roddenberry himself called the school's front desk, had them find my suite number, and he then personally called and spoke to my suite mate to take care of this. What are the odds? And then I call Roddenberry and he says, let me call you back for the interview, because this was the mid 80s and it was $1 a minute from Albany to Los Angeles for a phone call. So he called me and then he gave me almost an hour of his time. I'm a college kid, SUNY Albany Student Press, circulation 12,000. It was crazy. And we did this great interview. Oh. And then he said, young man, this was a lot of fun. I want to talk more. So we got on the phone the next day and talked more. And I didn't record. One of the greatest regrets of my life, I didn't record that second conversation. But it was amazing. And I sold the interview to Starlog with Gene and the sidebar with Majel. It wasn't my first interview that I had sold to Starlog. I had sold Tawny Welsh from Cocoon and James Remar from Clan of the Cave Bear. But those were my first Star Trek interviews. And that led to my 20-something years of writing for Dave McDonnell at Starlog. And it literally set everything else in my career in motion. So Roddenberry would be the big one. And then if you said to me, what was your most greatest experience on the show or with the franchise, it would be I was on the set of Star Trek IV when they shot in the Paramount parking lot in the water tank with the Klingon bird of prey in the water and the whale swimming by and they're jumping into the water. Jimmy Doohan slips and falls into the water. That's an outtake. That's at the tail end of Star Trek IV, if you watch it. It's the only outtake. Everything else is replays of scenes from the movie. This is the one outtake that's shoved in there. It's more or less an alternate take of what is in the movie. And they had lightning machines. This was old school Hollywood. They had fans blowing the water. They had Catherine Hicks. It was cold, and she was wearing a sweater. They had to tape her chest down because I think Leonard Nimoy was worried about the rating for the movie if it got too cold and things didn't go right. I mean, it was crazy to be on the set of one of the coolest scenes in one of the coolest movies. And I was 22 years old. I was 22 years old. So, yeah, those are a couple of my favorite stories from Star Trek. There are a ton of others. I mean, they let me be an extra twice on the show. That was cool. Starlog, I came up with the idea of how about a day in the life of Star Trek? So I literally toggled between the sets of Deep Space Nine and Voyager. I got there at like 8 a.m. and I stayed until late at night. And I spoke to the security guards. I spoke to the craft services people who make the food. I spoke to directors, sound guys. I went to the editing bay. I sat in Rick Berman's office. And we did, literally, it was a time clock of the entire day on the set. And that was a cool experience, too. And I watched them shoot, I think it was the Hull sequence from First Contact was also shooting. Very, very, very cool.
Yeah, for me, the biggest thing was I spent a day with Matt Jeffries.
Yeah.
So Matt,
oh, wow.
I went out to Matt's house, Matt and his wife Marianne, and we went and sat in his study. And this was before he just sold everything off. So that model of all the sets and everything, it was there, and he pulled it out, and we were like going through all the different pieces of art, and literally going through every piece of art, and him saying, "Oh yeah, that was like this, that was like that," and he's like, pointing at Declan Cochrane's house from Metamorphosis and going, "Yeah, never put a door in that. It's a bit of a cheat."
What year was that, Ben?
99, 2000. It was just before the auction. Yeah, so I mean, and that same trip, I got Bob Justman pulling me to one side and saying, "You don't know this yet, but you're going to buy me some wine." Bob was completely obsessed with wine and spent a fortune on getting wine from France. He'd come over on these big European trips and spend tens of thousands of dollars on wine. And then like weird ones, like one of my favorite people, I'm just sticking with the original series because otherwise we'll be here forever. People you get to interview, and John Meredith Lucas, one of my absolute favorite people I interviewed. I just thought he was a wonderful man. And this has got nothing to do with Star Trek. His grandfather, his stepfather was Michael Curtiz, who directed Casablanca. But then my grandfather had worked for Alexander Korda in the UK in the 30s, and he had known Michael Curtiz. So there's this kind of like weird connection between us. And I love John Meredith Lucas. I thought he was such an intelligent guy. And it was always such a shame he didn't come back for the third season as well.
Mm-hmm. And one of the other cool things, guys, and again, it's a offshoot as a connection. My late uncle was a guy named Gerald Mayer. Jerry's uncle was Louis B. Mayers and Metro Goldwyn Mayer. And my uncle was a television director. Yeah. And one of his, he directed several episodes of Mission Impossible. So he worked with Nimoy. He directed George Takei in an episode of something called O'Hara U.S. Treasury. He directed tons of the guest stars from Star Trek over the years in all sorts of things. He was good friends with William Campbell and directed Bill in like 3 or 4, like 2 movies and 3 or 4 shows. So the connections, he never directed Star Trek. He did Logan's Run. He did The Invaders. He did a little bit of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea. He did my favorite episode of The $6 Million Man. And his tennis partner for many years was Harv Bennett. It was just right. I mean, how all these things just come full circle is really very cool.
It is.
It's really a small town.
Oh, God, yeah.
Really,
when
it comes down to it.
So here as we speak, I'm being handed something that just arrived in the mail. I got these beautiful books that we're talking about right now.
I buy one.
That we can give away here on the show.
Wait, you're giving them away?
Well, I mean, I could charge for them, but I don't think I should do that. But yeah, look at these. Oh, and look, I can't even open them. They're wrapped. So, that will show that
do a contest or a giveaway,
All we need is Terry now. We just get Terry Farrell to come along and
Mm-hmm. There you go. And sign an 8x10 that, they were given away by her. Yeah.
How do we want to do this? You know, I do want to do like a contest or giveaway. I mean, this is on the spot, so I have no idea. Like, anybody have any good ideas? I mean, I naturally go to, tweet something, but, you know, maybe we should come up with a trivia question, maybe, and have people email us the answers.
What's there?
You guys know your stuff.
Well, there's so much Star Trek trivia.
Right.
I'm trying to think what stories we haven't just blown in the interview. Would be a good story.
Well, we didn't talk about Walter. Or...
we could talk about something really trivial. So we could ask which actor who. No. Okay, this is even better. Name 2 actors who played a Vulcan who wasn't Spock, but could have been Spock. 2 actors, not one, but 2.
2 actors who played Vulcans that could have been Spock.
So, but one of them was put forward for the role and was Joe D'Agosta's favored choice.
Oh.
And one of them was actually offered the role when Leonard Nimoy was having contract issues at the end of the first season.
Okay.
Interesting. So as a huge Star Trek fan,
I can't play, right? Because I know the answer.
I know one
no,
of
you
these.
Can't play, Ian. No.
If you read the book, you know the answer.
It's in there.
Yeah,
it's a good
I'm
question.
working my way through it. So, that's a good one.
So, that's the question. So, anybody who has the answer and would like to win one of these books, you can email us the answers to positivelytrek@gmail.com. positivelytrek@gmail.com. Put in the subject line Star Trek book. We'll make it pretty simple that you're submitting your answer to win one of these books. So, yeah, these just arrived. I was sitting here as we're talking. I was getting these notifications that there's a package. So I sent my wife to go see what it was because I have a feeling it might be this.
Yeah. And so, Bruce, we have, is it 3 to give away? Is that right?
We have 3 to give away. Well, I mean, unless I keep one. No, I'm not keeping one. Yes, we have 3 to give away. Yes.
Okay. So of the people who answer correctly, we'll randomly pick 3 of them, I guess, of the correct answers.
I was going to say, it's quite a tough question, I think.
It is a tough question.
You might not get 3 people.
Tough,
you might have to be like, if you get one of them right, you can have.
Or the first 3 people who get it right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That could be, yeah.
Yeah. We'll figure it out.
Let us
make
know.
it fair.
I want an email from you, please, saying who got the books. That'd be awesome.
Well, and then
yeah, for sure.
We'll do that. And then also when we finish recording, I want to know the answers so we make sure we get know if they get it right or not, right? So
definitely. Well, yeah. So those of you listening, even if you don't know the entire answer, send in what you do know because you never know.
I think a lot of people will know one of them.
Yeah, I know one of them for sure.
Yeah. Same,
so
yeah.
But that second one, that's a little tricky.
Yeah.
All right.
There you go.
Excellent.
So, real quick, we didn't talk a whole lot about William Shatner, but there is some new news about Shatner that Dan and Ian were telling me about before the show. Here in the New York Post, it mentions he's going to space.
That is real.
Is that real?
Next month, no less. 90-year-old William Shatner is going to go up into space and be the oldest person ever to do it. How cool is that? People are wondering, will he go up in costume? Will he do whatever? Trust me, I'm sure he won't. Okay, but I think it's unbelievable. It's perfect.
As if he wasn't immortal enough.
Right. How many missions has he, called into and said, this is your wake-up call. It's Captain Kirk. This kind of a thing. For him to actually go up into space, I think is brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Whether he thought of it, whether the Bezos people thought of it, however it happened, I think it's great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So yeah, like you said, next month in October, he'll be up in space, a 15-minute flight, just like Jeff Bezos just recently did on his Blue Horizons spacecraft. And like you say, oldest person to be in space. That's quite a milestone. That's pretty cool. He's going where other people have gone before, but he'll still be setting a milestone, a new record.
Absolutely,
there.
Right. Where no 90-year-old has gone before.
True, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. Now, Jimmy Doohan got to space, but
and Gene as well, yeah. But yeah, I was going to say Bill will be the first one to come back.
Well,
Absolutely.
some on the show may want him to stay up there.
Oh, Jimmy's already up there. I think Jimmy would rather he came home.
I'm staying the hell out of that conversation.
Yeah, that's a landmine. That's a third rail to touch. We won't go too much there.
I hope they do a reality show of him prepping.
I'm sure.
I'm sure
that.
there's
I
a
think it would be
documentary in
interesting
the
to
works,
see
no
that.
doubt about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we'll be keeping an eye on this and reporting how the flight went, of course, when it happens. So that's pretty cool. It's our first Star Trek star actually going to space. It's definitely a milestone.
Quite a thing.
Okay, I'm going to put you guys on the spot real quick before we end this. And you don't have to say anything, but I'm just curious, have you seen or heard anything about Prodigy that you have an opinion about what the show might be like when it comes out?
Yeah.
Are you excited?
I think it's look, I was sorry, name dropping. I was interviewing Mike McMahon about the Cerritos last week, and Mike is lovely and incredibly enthusiastic, and he was saying, I knew that we got it right when I heard that people were pissed off.
I love that answer. Yes.
And Ian and I remember when Next Gen started and people were pissed off. This isn't my Star Trek, this is different. And I think it's kind of important that Prodigy, there's a lot of stuff out there that is designed to satisfy old men like me, and Prodigy is designed to bring in a teenage audience that doesn't necessarily care about the original series or even Next Gen or any of that stuff. And I think it's pretty important from the franchise point of view for Star Trek that it brings in new blood, that it brings in young people who get to see what makes Star Trek good. I know the guys who are working on Prodigy are serious about making good Star Trek. I know that's their intention, but it is also their intention to make something that 14-year-old kids really enjoy. And I think, they have to be given that chance. And, it probably is going to piss off old people, but that's kind of important. And, any franchise has to grow and change. And I think as long as they do it with some seriousness and a belief in the kind of core values of Star Trek, then I'm all for it.
And then building on what Ben said, my feeling is, look, A, the more the merrier, and B, if it's done well and it generates the interest in Star Trek, maybe those new fans will go back and check out everything else that's come before. And
all 800 episodes.
All 800 episodes, and they'll buy one book called Star Trek: The Original Series.
They need to buy a book just to give them an idea of what the original was all about.
So, no, I think it's great. The more the merrier. Again, to Ben's point, if they do it right, if they take it seriously, look, it's going to be canon. So it's a game changer, however you look at it. But there's room. Bring it on. Let's see what they do. I'm excited.
For sure. Yeah, me too. Definitely. So the important question, though, of course, Ben, we're getting a Cerritos model from Eagle Moss. I'm very excited about that. Very happy to see it. Will we be getting a protostar at some point?
I would like to think so. It's not going to be within the next year. But yeah, I would like to think that certainly every significant Star Trek ship we'll get to make. But, we just have to wait and see. Just depends on whether people keep buying stuff as much as anything.
Excellent. You can count on me.
Absolutely. What else do you have out that you want to promote here on the show and let people know about?
Well, we have we do have other Star Trek books. So we have a book written by my friend Rob Perlman about Grudge's view of Star Trek, which I think is a lot of fun. It's very entertaining. I'm just trying to think which other books. I've lost track here, and I'm thinking about the middle of next year.
That's the Book of Grudge. Ben is talking about the Book of Grudge. I would talk a little bit about the one that's in the works, which is Nana's book.
Oh, well,
yes.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. Yeah, I spend a lot of time on that every week. Yeah, I mean, that's a fascinating book.
Oh, he's sneezing. That's called A
Woman's Trek. Yes. I mean, Nanar is, it's something we came to Nanar and said, this is a subject that we think is interesting and it isn't being covered enough. Would you like to do this? And she was like, oh, yeah. And it's been fascinating sitting in on all the interviews that she's done, and seeing the different kind of experiences that women have had over the years and how incredibly inspirational Star Trek has been for people. But also, I mean, I didn't realize, because I'm in the UK, I don't think this was true, but, that women couldn't get credit cards in their own name in the US in the 1970s. Mm-hmm. You had to get it in your husband's name. And if you were so there are various actors who are like single mothers. So Nikki DeBurr was saying that her mum was a single mother. She couldn't get a credit card. Or Hannah Louise Shearer was Hannah's still angry about it, quite rightly. So we've already talked to all the writers, all the writers who were on, all the female writers who were on staff who are still with us. We talked to a few of the actresses, so obviously Nicole DeBurr, Penny Johnson, Kate Mulgrew. Got a bunch more interviews coming up in the next couple of months. I think it's I think it's important. I think it's something timely. I think it's actually a story that is incredibly complicated, because sometimes Star Trek is absolutely in the right place. I mean, Nanar's line is, Nichelle Nichols went where no woman of color had been before, but she went there in a miniskirt. And that kind of sums up Star Trek in the 60s and to some extent in the 80s and the 90s. And then when you get to the modern shows, one of the things that's most striking about the last episode of season 3 of Discovery is there is literally a token man on the bridge. Everybody else on that bridge is a woman, and the show's being written by women and produced by women and directed by women. And showrun, absolutely, yeah. Yes. I mean, yeah. So, Star Trek is a kind of a microcosm of what's happening in society. In many ways, it's on the cutting edge of it. It has these aspirations. I think it's going to be. I think it's going to be a really interesting read, and I think it's past due. And I think it kind of really gets in a way to actually being what Star Trek's really about, because it's a book that will be about something.
Right, and just to follow up on what Ben's saying, it's not just people from Star Trek, it's women influenced by Star Trek.
Yeah, we've been talking to like NASA scientists and
feminists
and feminists and all sorts of people.
All of that. And then also to answer your question about other books, if I'm looking at our schedule, just out was Deep Space Nine and Beyond, which was one of our art books.
Oh, my concept art obsession, yes.
2294 to the Future, which is another art book. Both of those are out. We've got the Star Trek The Next Generation Nerd Search coming up as well, which should be a lot of fun.
That'll really test your knowledge of the series. Yeah.
Yes, that's kind of Where's Waldo with a twist. You're looking for mistakes in Star Trek images that are made on purpose. Mm-hmm. So you've got to point out what's wrong with the images. There's a next celebration book, which I think you can guess the title of at this point, and there's a familiar writer
that
involved
might be a
with
year
that.
away. Yeah. You might be grateful if it's a year away.
So there's a lot. And then what's there's a Alpha Quadrant, another Alpha Quadrant art book coming up.
Yeah, well, those are the big ship catalog books. So those are like the encyclopedias of ships books, which obviously we're getting pretty deep into that now. And then the other thing that we've got is a big project. Those of you who've been collecting the Big Build Up Enterprise will see that we've been starting to do our kind of episode by episode stuff. Well, we're going to take that and expand on it and do season by season companions for Next Gen, where we're putting in everything that we can find. And I have been literally sitting here scanning transparencies
wow.
TNG season 1. So yeah, I mean, I've collated a lot of material. I mean, we won't quite be able to squeeze it all in because I just found 60 pages of storyboards from Encounter at Farpoint We can't publish a book quite big enough to put everything in. But the idea is to do like a really in-depth, really illustrated, with as much stuff on the visual effects and the concept art and costumes and the makeup and all of that as possible. So I'm really looking forward to that. I think it's something the series has been crying out for.
Well, we're going to have some really great episodes in December because Dan and I have both ordered the Borg Cube Advent Calendar.
Oh, cool. That is so cool. That is so cool. You should be.
So we're going to reveal, talk about it.
You're going to do it every day. You're going to do like a daily. Well, yeah, come on.
We're not going to do a daily podcast.
Right.
I want to do this like a tweet every day of like, okay,
a tweet every, we can do that,
and this is what we got.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I've got my YouTube channel. I've been thinking of doing like a daily, just little minute long reveal kind of thing or something like that maybe. So.
And what's cool with that is there are two others of the Advent calendars. There's a Doctor Who one. So I'm sure your Doctor Who equivalent out there,
yes.
hosts of the podcast, are going, their heads are getting ready to explode. And there's also a Beatles one.
That one looks really cool too. Yeah.
Which is really cool. Yeah.
I saw some great Beatles stuff just the other day. I was in Cleveland and I was at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and seeing some really cool Beatles stuff there. So yeah, my mind's on Beatles right now. So maybe I'll have to get
the
that
Beatles
one
Advent is beautiful. I mean,
oh my gosh.
They're all really, really great, but the Beatles.
I want all three.
Yeah, well, feel free. I mean, but I really, I really hope that people get a blast out of those. I think they're. I mean, I claim no credit for them. I did a bit of consultancy work and made a few suggestions to them, but the team that worked on those come up with, I think they're absolutely beautiful. And I can't wait to see people opening them and having fun. And the other thing that's really cool about them is the stuff in them is worth about twice as much as what they actually cost. So by the time you've got all this stuff out, you'll be like, oh, actually, this was really cheap.
Yeah, you're actually getting these items at a discount.
Yeah. Everything's about, well, like I said, the contents are worth more than double what you pay for it. So I think pretty cool. You should be pretty happy.
So this book that we've been talking about, Star Trek: A Celebration, I assume that all the major booksellers are selling this, or maybe even through your website?
Yes, all of the above. Yeah, so you can always come and get it direct from us at shop.eaglemoss.com. Obviously, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Books A Million, all those kind of places. Amazon are actually discounting the Voyager book really heavily at the moment. So if you didn't pick that up, this is a good time to do a double buy. You like one, you should like the other.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, we are super proud because in the US, it's #1 on the art of movies and television.
Nice.
The Star Trek Celebration book. And it's been all week.
Oh, congratulations.
Thanks. We're ahead of Harry Potter and Dune, which just, blows my mind.
That's awesome.
That's music to my ears.
Yeah. We are thrilled.
But the other thing is come and find us on Twitter and tell us what you think of the book. I mean, we're proud. But what matters is that it makes people happy. That's the whole goal, is to give you some fresh insight, tell you some things you didn't know, share a few funny stories, make you think again, make you look again. And just remember why Star Trek's such an exceptional thing.
And what's that handle on Twitter?
For me, I am, oh my God, what am I? I am at Ben C.S. Robinson, I think. I'm easy to find. There aren't too many Ben Robinsons. There's some basketball player or something, but you pretty obviously not me.
And best way to find me, everybody, is Facebook. Just Ian Spelling on Facebook. I'm much quicker to respond on Facebook.
Does anybody ever accidentally call you Aaron Spelling?
All the time. And I interviewed Aaron Spelling a million years ago, and we were trying to figure out if we were related. And I kind of said to him, you don't want to be because I'm coming after my money.
Yeah, actually, that's...
if we are.
I didn't tell you this. There's another story in that Aaron Spelling had his office on the lot at Deslu. And the post-production guys used to watch the actresses going into Aaron Spelling's office on a Friday night.
Oh, man.
Wow. Good for him.
Oh, dear.
I'm not drawing any conclusions. I mean, there may well have been a lot of actors going in as well.
Right. And Tori Spelling asked me the same thing when I interviewed her for some House of Yes, a movie that she was in. Yeah. It's very funny. Yeah. I get asked that all the time. Any relation? I'm like, I wish.
Well, thanks, guys, for joining us. We really appreciate it. Great book. I'm not done reading it, and I'm looking forward to finish the rest of it. And, of course, we're giving this out as that giveaway, positivelytrek@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter @positivelytrek, also on Instagram, and check out the Positively Trek Facebook discussion group. We have a page, but you want to get in that discussion group where you can talk about this book and other things Star Trek related. And I'm at Admiral_Rex. Dan?
I'm at Kertrats. That's KERTRATS. Just Star Trek backwards.
And guys, I'll give you the final words on anything you want to say about Star Trek that comes from the heart.
Oh, no pressure. Ian, you go first. I'm
thanks, boss.
Yeah.
You know what? Look, Star Trek changed my life. If you said to me 30-something years ago, as a kid watching it at repeats in New York at 6 and 11 o'clock on Channel 11 Pix in New York, that I'd still be talking about it, writing about it, having been on it, writing my first book about it, never would have believed it. So I'm one of many, many, many people's lives. Gene Roddenberry's creation changed for the better. So I'm incredibly grateful for Star Trek and honored and thrilled and proud to have even a teeny little connection to it. So that's my story.
Yeah, and for me, I think it is that kind of privilege thing. This book is the combined experiences or interviews and whatever that Ian and I've done, and to realize how many and how lucky I was to get to talk to those people. It's you'd be mad not to realize how lucky that is and how privileged it is, and also just that Star Trek endures. It really, really does. And when you look at this book, I think you'll get some idea of why. It looks great, and it's got ideas. It's got ideas and heart and casting. So many things that just came together in a kind of perfect way that nobody could have predicted.
Well, it was a privilege talking to both of you, and we really enjoyed it. And thank you again so much for joining us and for the book. And we want to say to you and to our listeners out there to stay positive.